I was working with a client who had recently found out that her little boy had recently been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And it's been a big change for her and the entire family, because when you have, a diabetic child, everybody in the family needs to become watchful, if he's in the care of whoever. And so she needed to clear the memory of when they got the diagnosis. It was the potential diagnosis that she was told that this is what he may have, and that now he was going to have to go to the emergency room, and that from that emergency room, they were very sure that what they were looking at was type 2, and he had to be rushed to a children's hospital. And so for her, that memory needed to be cleared of actually seeing him on a gurney and thinking, oh my God, like my little boy is really sick. He's really, really sick. And just seeing them taking him and strapping him down on the gurney was very traumatic for her to see that. And it had that, she said, like ever since that had happened, like she wasn't sleeping as well. She had constant underlying anxiety. And it was this constant feeling of urgency around him. And after we had cleared that memory in the session, she was smiling and she was relieved. And she said, now when I think about that memory, I know that he's going to be okay, that they're taking him to where he's going to get the best treatment possible, that he's going to be okay when I think about that now.
What I love is that I'm able to take the client from distressed to being okay. And also taking the client to know that she can feel distressed and that it will move through her and pass, and she can come back to being okay. So for example, I had another client I worked with who also lost her spouse at a relatively young age. And we did some previous coaching together as I was getting my empowerment coach certification. I was able to support her to some extent, but I reached out again with my gentle trauma release. And she had immediate emotional release. And as we started exploring things, we realized there was actually a lot more trauma that had happened to her prior to her husband passing. It wasn't just this, right? So she was already dealing with some trauma in her system on top of this shocking loss. And in 2 sessions, she's learning to shift out of anger, which was just her resisting all other emotions and it just coming out as anger, to being able to sit in her body and allow it to release and come back to being okay, and to know that she's still going to be okay. So that's one of the biggest things, is they can go back to being okay regardless of what they're releasing. Yeah. I mean, I never would have dreamed a year ago that I could sit with a woman who had been through something so traumatic, like, a murder of a close family member, and take her from, the most obviously distressed to being okay, and being able to deal what was ahead of her with dealing with parole situations with the person that perpetrated the crime. And so many other, some of the things are just brutal, right? And I mean, I'm a pretty empathetic person. So if I was just listening to everyone's stories, I'd be pretty traumatized. But to know if I can get through that, she's going to be okay. And I don't need to be intimidated by what's happened to them. I never would have dreamed of being able to do that a year ago.
I mentorship coached a gal. I started working with her in the empowerment coaching program, and I did some coaching with her there. And that's when I realized there's something missing, because she had so much trauma that she was trying to recover from, and I couldn't help her with that end of it. And for me, that was just like, oh like I really need something. And then gentle trauma release came along and I went, yes, my answer, my gift. Thank you. Thank you. She was struggling with a series of events over a 12-year period. She was a consultant for the military overseas, and that's where she met her husband that really is the result of a lot of the trauma. When her son was born, when he was about 1 year old, she found out, and she had followed this man to another country, his home country. And she found out that he was having affairs. And he dumped her and the baby and said, yep, you're on your own, and went off to Afghanistan. Yeah, so he left her there with knowing nobody except his family, who were not at all supportive of her. She had no friends really to speak of. And so that event alone traumatized her. And then she went back to the States and raised her son on her own until he was about 8 years old. And then this man decided to come back into his son's life, and he wanted to move him to his country of origin to raise him. Because she traveled so much in her career, the court awarded custody to him. And in fact, it was such a battle that it's now used as a precedence for international custody battles. I mean, it was that bad. So and the court told her, we're awarding custody to your ex-husband. If you want to have shared custody, you are going to have to move to his country in order to be with your son. I mean, I can't imagine anything more devastating. So she did that. She gave up her career when COVID hit because all of her assignments overseas ended. So she gave up her career. She moved to this other country, and she has a wonderful relationship with her son now, I'm happy to say. But in the last 2 years since that, she's also lost both of her parents whom she had become estranged from. So she didn't get to say goodbye to them when they passed. And then a year after that, her grandmother, who was her absolute rock, she also transitioned. So this poor woman has been left with so much grief and trauma. It's just been incredible trying to process her through it. But and she also happens to be in order to find a new career, she had joined the personal empowerment class. And she was really struggling with that because of all this other stuff that was going on. I am happy to report that just last week, she said, I have completed my coursework. I have just been assigned my first client to do mentorship coaching, and I'm moving forward. She's also gotten her Pilates certification, so she started doing that. And it's all attributable to gentle trauma release. Had I not been able to do the protocols and utilize the methods in the gentle trauma release, I could never have brought her to this space. She was in such a traumatized, uncontrollable emotional state when I started working with her. And she's just like blossomed, and she's on it now. And I'm so excited for her.
There's so many of them. Oh, one of the other ones that I sent you that you're going to watch is a woman who had been diagnosed with, and she never felt right about the diagnosis, that she had been diagnosed with a form of dystonia in her neck, to where it's like involuntary muscle movements. We had this memory that we cleared for her from when she was a little girl. And she was, for some reason, I always felt that this was trauma. And she's done a lot of work. So she's familiar with trauma and work and somatic practices. And so I just always felt like this was trauma that got stuck in my body and was trying to find a way to come out. She goes, but they were telling me it was dystonia. And I guess that at some point over that year, her neck was actually like tilted to where she had to stop running. And she used to love to run. And she had to stop running. And she's, because when I run, she was, and my head would be tilted, she says, that's all you can think about is your neck. And so we cleared this memory that she had from when she was a little girl. And I had gotten in touch with her a couple days after the session to ask her how she was doing. And she's so fiery. And she's like, girl, she's like, let me tell you, she goes, it is epic. She goes, what is happening? She goes, I went out for a run today. She goes, this is the first time, and I forgot how many years it was, that she said, I felt my legs and not my neck. And then she says, she goes, because even at the end of the session, and you'll see at the end of the session, she starts doing this with her neck. And she's like, whoa.